Well, good day, viewers. Today we're going to start this timing chain job on this 17 Tiguan. It's got the 2-liter TSFI, I believe. And I bought a kit. I'll put a link in the description to the kit. From Canada Auto Supply out of, I think it was out of BC. But it comes with pretty much everything you need. It comes with a cam cover, or a timing cover, lower timing cover, oil pan, obviously the 3 chains, I guess the main chain and the balance shaft chain and oil pump drive chain, the spool valve, crank bolt, looks like sprocket bolts, tensioner, silicone, guides, some fastening bolts, this aluminum housing which has a tendency to apparently fail behind the intake camshaft. Even comes with the serpentine belt in the kit. I also ordered some special tools because you need one of these sockets, special sockets, to take this spool valve out. So we got it on the hoist. We're going to pull the right front wheel off and have a look at what's involved here. So disconnect the negative battery cable and isolate it from the post so it doesn't touch it. I've got a universal fixture installed here because we have to support the engine and remove this front motor mount. 2 17mm bolts here, 2 18mm bolts here, and a 13mm bolt there, and then this comes out. I don't know if we have to drain the cooling system or not. Let's put that off to the side. Probably do. Yeah. I'll put a block of wood underneath here so that it spreads the pressure out, because this is just plastic. So there are 4 fasteners that hold that motor mount bracket to the engine. But to access the upper bolts, you have to raise the engine about 1.5 inches. They're M12 triple square. They appear to be the same size so far. So I stand corrected, there was only 3 fasteners. That's good. And once the 3 fasteners are out, that comes out quite nicely, and that opens it up pretty good. Now we're going to lower this back down and take the charge air cooler pipe off. I got the serpentine belt. I think we're going to be draining the coolant because these are coolant lines here and they're kind of in the way. It would certainly be easier if they weren't on there. So there's the upper timing cover off, and I see a broken guide here. It's just sitting there. Amazing that that didn't fall down inside there and take out something more important. So we have this housing. There's an O-ring seal in here that came with the housing. The spool valve is not stuck. I checked it in the previous video, but the timing chain is stretched. I guess that's part of the rear housing. Wonder if we have to take the cam cover off. Well, we'll investigate further. So there's the charge air cooler pipe removed. There's special little clips that you just pull up and the hoses just slide out. I've taken the serpentine belt off, and I've taken the pulley off here, hoping that it would give me enough access to get these bolts behind the timing cover here. But it doesn't look like it. And it looks like this belt tensioner is part of this aluminum bracket here. Wow. Why wouldn't you make it bolted on? I've got to look at the service literature maybe. So turn the crankshaft until the notch on the harmonic balancer is lined up with this arrow here on the timing cover. and the timing marks on the camshaft are upright. And we're going to remove the pulley at that position there. So if the crankshaft turns backwards when you take the pulley bolt out slightly, re-index it. There's no keyway, but there's a master spline here, if you will, on the end of the crank. That has to be vertical to the center line of the engine by the looks of it. Anyways, I'm hoping I can get this timing cover off without having to pull all this bracketry off. There's one bolt behind here, but we're gonna attempt to take it off. Let's have a look at the top now. Well, I'm not sure that this is correct because it doesn't look right. There's one mark here, and that's facing vertical, but I can't see any marks on this sprocket anywhere. I'll show you what it looks like in the service literature. So it shows the mark at about 11 o'clock, and this one at about 12:30. But that pulley doesn't even look like that because it's got that phaser on it. And then we look at this picture where they tell you to take that spool valve out, and they don't show the mark, unless that's it there. I notice there's a colored link here, but that's only for initial installation, I believe. Well, I'm going to put that pulley back on and turn it another 360 degrees and see if there's any other marks, because the cams could be out 180. So there's a timing pointer here and there's a timing pointer here, and I'm not sure which one they're using. I'm sure the picture shows that timing mark lining up to there. I took the bridge off, the spool valve out, because there's another timing mark right down there. This appears to be a timing mark, but I can't see any marks whatsoever on here. Oh, and by the way, this spool valve is left-hand thread, so you have to tighten it to remove it, and you need one of the special sockets that came in that kit. And take all the Torx bits, bolts out. I found another piece of plastic laying on top here. If I take that harmonic balancer off, you have to put a bolt in there because that crank gear can jump. The crank gear is here somewhere. I'm sure there was a new one. Oh yeah, right here. So you can see how it's designed. So that's what this is for. You put that on after you take the balancer off. So I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to take the balancer off right where it is and put that plastic washer on there with the bolt so that it keeps the crank gear from jumping on the crankshaft. And then we'll try and line it up with the internal marks. There's internal marks inside, because I'm having difficulty finding the timing marks on the cam. So if you spin the tensioner clockwise and put a retaining drill bit in here, like 3/16 or slightly smaller, you can pivot this up out of the way enough to get at that bolt. It's still a challenge, but you can get at it. And then I'm going to put the tensioner back down again, give me as much room as possible. Doesn't mention anything about removing the AC compressor, because that tensioner is part of that AC compressor bracket. And technically I think you're supposed to remove this elbow off the turbo as well, because this housing is pretty close, but hopefully it'll come out of there. I'll take this bracket off here too as well. Well, I can see why they give you the timing cover as part of this kit, because you virtually destroy it getting it off. That silicone that they use on there is like epoxy. Anyways, it bent the hell out of the cover getting it off, but I didn't care because I had a new one. I did have to take this elbow off here, off of the turbo There's an O-ring seal in there. I'll have to figure out how that goes in. Had to remove the solenoid. There's a little solenoid back there. Disconnect the two lines off of the that go to the solenoid on these two nipples on the wastegate here. And the cover is off. You can see how far out that timing chain tensioner is now. Like it's almost completely extended. Anyways, now we'll lift it up and see if we can see the timing marks. There's that nylon spacer on the old crank bolt. So I did a bunch of research last night, and this appears to be the timing mark on the exhaust cam. It's a notch, but the timing mark on the intake cam is laser etched, and that looks like the mark right there, but it doesn't line up. And I know the timing's out, but I don't think it's out that much, because this mark should be roughly here right now. The chain is terribly loose, but I don't know if it's jumped. Of course, the exhaust cam could be out of time because there's no cam sensor on the exhaust cam. I gotta line up the mark on the bottom. The mark on the bottom, the flat on the crank gear goes parallel to the block surface. So this mark, this notch goes up, and if you flip this over, this flat right here is on top of the crank when it's upright. So with that, like that, that puts that timing mark at around 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. I'm going to check that. So there's the crank mark there, but I had to turn it another quarter of a turn. Let's see which one of those timing marks up top might be in time. I'm not sure if this one is supposed to be at the bottom, but this is close. Of course, the engine's tilted, so that's roughly 8 o'clock. Let's look at the mark up top now. Well, as near as I can tell, the crank mark is right because I put a screwdriver in number 1 cylinder and the piston's at top dead center right there. But this mark is close. It should be around here, and this mark should be back here. I found a video online, I'll link to it in the description, where the tech talks about 62 millimeters from this rib to the timing mark. There's no timing marks on the covers. It's based on chain link colors, which only line up when you assemble it. After it's assembled, they never line up again. So this mark was supposed to be 62 to 63 millimeters, I believe, from the rib to here. This is about 55 according to the vernier, and then 124 I think was the total dimension between the two. We're gonna take it apart here and hopefully this is gonna work out. So there's the two camshafts locked with the service tools, and this is roughly 62 millimeters. There is a notch in here as well, but that was the laser etched mark on there. I put a white paint dot on it. I don't want to say this out loud, but it's timed with the colored links. So if the colored links are lined up and the crank is lined up, then it's got to be timed. But I had to turn this exhaust cam was like right here. Now it would not flag an exhaust cam being out of time because there's no cam sensor on the exhaust cam. The cam sensor is on the intake cam right up here, right in this area here. There's the cam sensor right there. So I don't believe it has an exhaust cam sensor because the timing is only controlled on the intake side. So we're going to take the balance shaft chain off next, It's kind of a challenge to get that front guide out of there. It doesn't come out past the oil pan very well, or past the oil pan boss, or the lower part of the block. So you see the flat on the crankshaft is vertical and parallel to the block center line of cap here. Ran into another snafu. Can't get this balance shaft chain tensioner out unless I pull the CV shaft out. Doesn't say anything about that in the service literature. Guess it wouldn't be a problem on an Audi front wheel rear wheel drive. But that's up vertical. We got to find the timing marks on the balance shaft. There's one mark right there. There's one mark right there. And that's all timed with this. Now this oil pan chain doesn't come out either, or oil pump chain doesn't come out either. So we got to drop the pan to get that off, and this has got an oil pan heater on it, so I have to either sacrifice it or try and peel it off. So I undid the lower ball joint, three nuts, and tapped the CV shaft out from the inboard. Just push the knuckle out slightly. Got the tensioner out. Now this oil pan that I got with the kit has a location for, I believe, an oil level sensor. This pan doesn't have that, so I'm going to reuse this pan. Yeah, I'm going to reuse this pan. Hopefully we can get this gasket material off. So make a white paint mark on the crank gear where the top is, and make a mark on the block. This colored link lines up to that mark. That colored link lines up to that notch. That colored link lines up to that notch. And then put the tensioner in. Now you need a thin wall 1 1/16 socket to tighten this balance shaft tensioner. Well, there's all the timing chains installed. So you can see the lower mark here lines up with the crank sprocket. There's no timing mark on the oil pump chain. It doesn't require timing. The guide's in, tensioner in, lock pin pulled. I'm going to take the cam lock out and we'll turn it over a couple times. Now these colored links will never line up again. Well, they might after a couple hundred revolutions or something. So the torque on this spool valve is 35 Newton meters. Use an 18 mil wrench on the back of the camshaft. The torque on the 6 mil bolts on the bridge is 9 Newton meters. All the guide bolts, pivot bolts, are 20 Newton meters. This bolt here, I believe, is 9 Newton meters, but there's 2 variations, so always double check your specs on your particular application. I had a hell of a time finding the specs, but I finally found them. And I believe the torque on the cranks bolt is 111 foot-pounds plus 90 degrees, but I'm going to double check that. So I was right, it's 150 Newton meters, which is 111 foot-pounds plus 90 degrees. So I've marked the bolt at the bottom, and I'm going to turn it another 90 degrees. I used this, I don't have the holding fixture, but I put a chisel into the teeth of the flywheel here to stop the engine from turning. Oil's back together and running. Fresh oil change, new filter. Seems to be running okay, but we're going to check it for codes. So I have to update my Rustech software. Let's see how it restarts now. Nice and quiet. Let's shut it off and restart it. One more long crank. check engine light is out, so that's a good sign. We're going to erase all the code from the network. So I'm going to clear all DTCs from all the computers right now. And I'm going to reset the oil life system. Service replacement, service interval reset. Select an option, North America. Perform. Okay, done, go back. Okay, we're going to start it up and look at some data. So just got back from a road test. Cam timing is working now. No more check engine light. TPMS light is on. Let's done, go back. Let's read fault codes one more time. No fault codes. Seems to run good. We couldn't evaluate the boost pressure problem because the cam timing was so retarded. So we'll call this one fixed until the next thing breaks on this thing.